Welcome back, everyone. Yep, it's another episode of the Steel Target Paint podcast. It's early on November 30th, and when I talk early, it's 6:30 Eastern time, which is actually impressive for our guest because it's even earlier for him. But first off, my partner in crime on this podcast, as always, is Steve Foster. Steve, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, Jeff. And you know what? Nobody will question Matt's commitment for getting up this early. So we appreciate you coming to join us. We got Matt Hopkins on the show with us today.
Matt, how are you
Good morning,
this morning?
everybody.
All right, great.
I'm doing actually great.
So, Matt, let's get right into it. You've put your name in the hat for USPSA president, and there are some other candidates out there, and we just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk to everyone, but probably more specifically to the steel shooters, because that is kind of a focal point of this podcast. So right off the rip, what is it that you feel you bring to that position that's going to be a benefit to the organization?
So I think the first thing I bring is that I have a differing opinion than the current administration or the current board members and anything like that. So I'm not set in my ways of thinking, and I have new ideas, and I'm willing to and open to listening to what members say and members' feedback, and taking that in front of the board and asking the board, like, why are we doing it this previous way? Should we do it another way? Should we look at something else and stuff like that? So I think it's an open-mindedness and everything.
Okay. So, I mean, I think that's good, but could you give, maybe an example of, how your thoughts differ from, say, what the current administration's is?
Oh, so this is a pretty easy one. I think we should live stream all the board meetings.
Okay, fair enough.
So everybody talks about transparency, and we don't get that in the current minutes. It's hard to articulate all the discussions that were had. So I think it should be easy at this point to live stream all the board meetings. I think we should have, at minimum, quarterly member meetings where members can offer input back to the board members. I think they're doing a good step on this, is where they're going to have the member meetings at every national, so including World Speed Shoot.
Yep.
But I think we should be able to do that on a virtual system. It's 2021 now, and it'll soon be 2022. And throughout COVID and everything, that the virtual teleconference meetings, or like Zoom or Teams meetings, have advanced like dramatically in this period of time.
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you can set those up so, people can come in as just listening, but they can raise their hand to ask a question and type it in, and you can have a monitor. So, there wouldn't be anybody necessarily that would ability to interrupt the meeting, so that would still be functional from the board's perspective, but would give everybody a view of what actually is going on. It's a very interesting perspective.
So, Matt, I've got a quick follow-up to that, because, we had Steve Moneypenny, which is running for president, on the podcast last week. We were talking a little bit about, getting member, feedback and involvement and those kind of things. And so in Jeff and I struggle a little bit with this one, because it's kind of for the most part, I would say, and I'm not as plugged into USPSA. I know Jeff shoots it more than I do. I haven't shot a match. It's been probably a year or two. There's plenty in Steel Challenge for me to travel and shoot matches and those kind of things. And I would say overall, I don't think Steel Challenge is broken at all. I think that there's some maintenance that needs to be done, specifically when it comes to, classifications. I think, like I shared last week or a week and a half ago, that, we've got the times have fallen significantly. I mean, back in 2016 at the Florida State match, was probably one of my first or second major matches I shot. I won the match and won Rimfire Rifle Open with a score of a 72. And now, I mean, 72
Top 20?
there's a yeah,
If you're lucky.
you'd have to scroll on practice score to find a 72, and there's a handful of us guys that have shot sub 60, and so what's happened is that the classification, we have far more grandmasters. And let's talk about rimfire rifle open as an example. We got far more grandmasters as a percentage than historically we've seen in USPSA and what we've seen in Steel Challenge. I know there's no hard and fast rule, but there seems to be a target of right around 5%. And I think, and Jeff can pull the numbers, but it's probably 12 or 13% grandmaster of the shooters that participate in rimfire rifle opener in that grandmaster range. So, it's a delicate topic because there's people that want to keep that badge of, hey, becoming a grandmaster, but yet there's still, I think the times need to come down. And Jeff and I have both been involved in the past with reviewing the times, the classification times, or what we call the peak times. But so you got this polarizing topic that, hey, I want my GM, but I can't shoot a grandmaster time. But also, I want to reclassify myself, and there's a process. But I guess I share that with you as a brief background. So that may be a topic that's probably, I don't know, I think, not to put words in Jeff's mouth, but it's probably the biggest maintenance item that needs to happen.
Oh, you can put those words in my mouth because I 100% agree with that.
So my question is, because again, it is, not everybody's going to be happy with any decision made. How do you take this as an example as USPSA president? How do you get, all perspectives and put together, a response or this type of maintenance? You know what I'm trying to ask, without ticking everybody off, and, not everybody's going to be happy, but
I think so. I think the biggest thing is be open to input. And one of the first things I want to do is when I become president is, I guess you can call it a vault or like a bag of all the ideas or issues or anything we need to address and get them all in one spot so we can look at them as a whole, like for USPSA, for SCSA, for multi-gun and everything like that. We need to be able to get all the ideas in one spot, or the request for changes or rules updates or classification changes in one spot, and be able to look at and see, okay, so all these ideas are in this one bucket. We need to pick like this first one to work on, and that's going to have the most impact. Like, I don't know exactly which one that is right now on anything, because we don't have a central location where we can bring all those ideas or changes that are needed or requests from the members to even evaluate right now. And I'll be the first one to admit, I'm not so much into Steel Challenge that I know what needs to be worked on. I've listened to podcasts, I've talked to people. I actually presented ideas on the Hunters HD Gold podcast this past summer. Yep. And I actually got a lot of feedback on that, and I've changed my way of thinking, and I think the biggest thing was adding more stages or changing the stages. That's the thing I got the most feedback on, and everything I'm hearing now from the people that are most active in Steel Challenge is it's good, don't mess with it. We don't really want more stages. We just want to make it better. And I'll be honest.
If I could just expound on that, and we've mentioned this before, but it really comes down to, I look at, people say, oh, well, and I've heard this, Steel Challenge is a redheaded stepchild of the USPSA. But they forget that we were the first discipline to get live streamed. Now you can say we were the guinea pig, but we were the first. Did they learn a lot of things? Sure. Was it possibly better for the nationals, the different nationals they had for USPSA? Probably. I would hope so. And I would hope that would continue to be better at the next World Speed Shoot. We're getting, I would like to see the World Speed Shoot and Steel Challenge be nothing but taken as seriously as all the other disciplines, including multi-gun. Okay, I don't shoot multi-gun. Steve doesn't shoot multi-gun. I can barely spell multi-gun. But the guys that shoot it love it.
I've never shot it either.
Yeah. The guys that
Yeah.
shoot it love it. It is a valid discipline in USPSA, and until that changes, those shooters need just as much respect to try to do to have all the things that are done for Steel Challenge and USPSA for them, and possibly some different things too.
So I think the biggest thing with getting, from my outside perspective right now, is USPSA has been going on since the 70s or 80s, so it's had a lot of history. They've been able to build up the sections, then build up the areas, and then nationals. I see that happening with Steel Challenge also. How many area matches did we have last year? Like 3 or 4?
Yeah,
maybe more.
Yeah, I think there was area 2. Yeah, area 2, area 6, 5, 7, 8, and 4. I think there was 6.
3 and 4. 3 and 4.
Yep.
So I think there's maybe one or two that didn't.
Yeah.
This past year, there was only one area that didn't have an area championship.
The most that I've seen since I've been shooting the game in the last 6 years.
Yeah.
I think it's just going to have to be built up, and it's just going to take a little time. And I don't think that Steel Challenge is any less important than USPSA. I think multi-gun, there's a lot to work on there, and I think the organization of USPSA needs to decide if they want to get into that or get out of it and make the mind up. From everything I'm hearing, the multi-gun competitors want a national organization with a stabilized rule set. I don't think there's anyone more able to do that on a national level than USPSA at this point. So one thing I'd want to do is work with 3-gun people and ask them what they need like in the rule set, what they want changed, and how they want that put out. But at that point, once that's done, it's on the 3-gun community to either adopt that and start having matches under those rule sets, so they can start building the base. And as soon as matches at the local level start happening, then you can look at seeing area matches happen, and then all that will feed up into nationals. That way, it's instead of one match a year ran by USPSA in the multi-gun discipline, it'll be hundreds and hopefully thousands at hundreds of different clubs. There's 500 clubs right now under the USPSA organization. I think 200 and something are specific to Steel Challenge, and then the others just do USPSA. So there's definitely the organization standpoint, the national footprint where they could take that rule set and give it out to all their clubs and let them build that multi-gun from the ground up. But there definitely needs to be an adoption from all the major matches for multi-gun, and I actually think that's actually possible now. Before there was we're going to do our own thing because we like doing that and we don't want to have a 120-page rule book. But every time we reference anything about safety or DQs, we reference the USPSA rule book. So it was just kind of like it was like an outlaw thinking, and I think that's changing, which I think is good for multi-gun. And I think it can actually increase the numbers in USPSA by a very large number, kind of with the same increase that we saw during Steel Challenge when it was kind of adopted and taken on to a national level instead of just the world speed match once a year.
Well, there's definitely been, as we just pointed out, we had, all of the areas except one having an area championship. I think some of the other things that a lot of people don't realize is, and I just pulled this up, as far as level 2 matches, there have been 23 so far. And we've still got a month to go. And I know
there's probably 2 or 3 on the calendar still.
Easily. Yeah. Yep. Well, this coming weekend is Florida State Steel Challenge. Yeah. And so here's the real big number, and just take a guess. Just have fun ballparking how many level 1 steel challenge matches have happened in 2021.
Wow.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I would have never guessed this number. I think it's gonna.
So hold on. So if there's roughly 200 clubs and they have a monthly match, so 200 times 12, what's that? 2,400?
Very good. It's 2,192.
That's amazing.
Okay. Well, we still have a month.
And we still got a month to go, so that could
Yeah.
that could be the 2,400. So good on
Yeah.
you, Matt, for using your math skills.
Yeah, 5:47 a.m.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But-
I'm over here going, where's my coffee?
But back to what you said though, Matt, just a little bit ago, because we talked briefly about it, but Brian's a close friend of ours, and when we heard you on his podcast, and you were talking a little bit about Steel Challenge, you mentioned different stages. I don't think that anybody necessarily wins that, like, hey, Matt doesn't know what he's talking about or anything like that. I take it as, hey, he just needs a little, to learn more. And unfortunately, I had some family situations that I wasn't able to join you guys out at Area 3. But, I think it's a sign of strength that, hey, look, you said it here on the podcast. Hey, you know what? I thought it was an idea that some people wanted, but, most people don't. And, I appreciate that open and honesty, for sure. There are definitely some other things that I think, and I shared some of these last week, but there was one topic that I didn't talk about that, there's kind of like 3 or 4 things that are, more of maintenance and not necessarily things are broken by any stretch of the imagination. But as the owner of Creekside Custom, I've done a lot of challenge coins and knives and cups and all that kind of stuff for matches. One of the other issues that I think, again, I don't want to make it out to be a super big deal, but I think where Steel Challenge may need to find some religion in the rule book, Steel Challenge dictates the level of awards by division, class, and special categories. And I think that there probably needs to be a little bit more structure, since the sport's grown so much at level 2 matches, to really talk about what it looks like. Jeff uses, I think, a 357. Is that right, Jeff? Or you use
That
a
is correct.
579?
Yep,
Yeah,
357.
357. And it's not, the intent is, by division, class, or and even special category. I think that's how he gives out awards. It's not meant to be participation trophies, but I think what happens from match to match, and I'm sure you see this in USPSA as well, is that the match book certainly needs to go out where the awards are in a good match book are dictated what's going to happen and who gets what, that type of thing, and what payouts are and so on and so forth. But I think across the country for a level 2 match, I think there needs to be structure. And I think if you asked, 10 Steel Challenge shooters what their opinion is, well, that may be different if they have a dad of a daughter that just happens to be 13 years old. She's a female, so she's classified as a youth shooter, or is she a junior shooter? And does she compete for the ladies title? And how does that impact an overall? So she could get, maybe more than one award for placing with one gun. So I think and I don't necessarily have a strong opinion on what that needs to look like. Outside that, I think that's another area, and maybe you see it in USPSA as well, but I think that's another area that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, we see that in USPSA, and so I'm going to match director the Area 3 USPSA match this year, and my thoughts on what they put in the rule book is the minimum that you need to do. I think match directors can go above and beyond that, and I understand what Steve's saying, that some choose to just do that and it's not offering a good service to the members. It's kind of a disservice at that point because they're not offering all the awards that the matches should have. I think we can definitely expand on that. I think one of the biggest things is, from my perspective, in that I've experienced personally, I've finished second overall in a division at a match. But since my classification is what it is, I get 0 awards. I think we can't neglect the people that finish at that top level. I think we need to add at least a 1, 2, 3 overall awards, because if there's 100 shooters in a division, you're obviously awarding probably 3 per class, but you're not recognizing the second or third overall finish of that division. So I think that's one of the big things. Steve, were you also maybe talking about, so if a competitor is in 2 or 3 different categories, they might win all 3 of them and not allow other people to win those?
Yeah, so I think that there has been a lack of consistency in that particular area, but yeah, that's exactly right. And you know, I shoot 10, 11 major matches a year typically, and so I've got that perspective, but I've had a whole different peek behind the curtain, because this past year I've probably done another 10 matches worth of making awards, and I've had to help direct, not in all situations, but I've had to help direct some of the match directors on what is fair and equitable, and how they, you know, as a recommendation. Because the other thing that happens from time to time, if I end up going to a match and I'm shooting PCC Open and I win high overall or whatever for the match, or typically there's not, like this past 2 weeks ago for this Panhandle All 8 match, as an example, they gave me an award for the PCC match, because in Steel Challenge you really have the main match, which is centerfire. Then you have PCC as a separate match. Then you have, rimfire pistol, then rimfire rifle, typically as separate matches as well. So some matches even will award a high overall for PCC. So I've got one of those awards, and then I won first place in PCCO, which I did, and I won high overall for the match. They didn't recognize that, which I'm okay with. But then also I got a second medallion or whatever for winning first place PCCO Grandmaster. And in most situations, a Grandmaster is going to win the high overall. Not at all, because there's some sandbagging that happens. That reminds me when I shot the Georgia USPSA match back in 2012. I think a C-class guy came in second overall in production, but that's another story. You know what I mean?
He just had Steve. He had a really good day. Okay.
Oh no!
Really good day.
Man, I was squatted with this guy, and I've spent a lot of time shooting with Dave Savigny, because he lives over here, and Dave was shooting, and I looked at him and I looked at this guy and went, yeah, okay, C-class. I mean, we were all over this guy, like, yeah, okay, sandbagger. But anyway, we don't see a lot of sandbagging in Steel Challenge, because every match is essentially a classifier. But there are times, Matt, where a preteen may, or they call it youth, may win
That's
that.
Preteen. It's preteen. It's you've got preteen. What is it? It's preteen, teen, junior, and then you've got, on the other edge of the spectrum for the age-based categories, you've got senior and super senior. So they did change the rule that basically says you can only compete in the category where your age falls. Because it used to be, if you were a preteen, you could compete in teen or junior as well. Right. And so they have kind of tweaked that, which I agree with. I mean, because and again, where you're going down here, I think it's great that they recognize so much at the All 8 match. But you run into the situation. In fact, we tweaked it after the first year, Steve. I know you remember the first year of the West Florida Steel Challenge Championships. You needed the van you had because you took so much hardware home. Because we did that. We did class, we did match, or we did class, we did division, and we did match. And yeah, a GM is more than likely going to take away all three of those away. And then you run into this situation that happened. What match was it? Where, it was the Rimfire World Championships, where they gave away the overall winner won high overall, but they didn't win first place in that in iron or in limited.
Yeah, so basically they won overall, and then second place overall finish won first.
That is correct. That is correct. You know, and that's a way you can distribute the stuff. And there's never a perfect methodology. I've kind of come up with one that seems to work for us, which is we start at the class level. And if I have enough people in the class, then we do the 3-5-7 rule. If I'm not giving out enough awards in 3-5-7, then I will go to the division. And so that does tend to recognize, and in fact, I'm tweaking it again this year, because I had one where I gave out awards in single stack, but they were at, I believe, the B or C level. And I had a grandmaster and two masters that got nothing. And I realized I'm doing a disservice to those. Now, again, it's a level 2 match. And we're big on recognition. So that's when you said the suggestions in the rule book are minimums to do. I like that. So, and again, if it's my match and I want to give out a participation trophy for, high senior lady B class rimfire rifle open, why does the USPSA care? Has always been my question.
I don't think they care. I think that's totally up to the match director to do. And I don't see a problem with that. I actually don't even see a problem if someone wanted to give all the juniors awards. That was some of the feedback I got when I was at the Area 3 match this year, just talking to people and seeing because it's obviously my biggest weakness, and I don't want to come in there and just throw my ideas out. I want to ask and see what they say. And one of the biggest feedback I got was that the junior shooters are shooting against, let's just the juniors are shooting against Grant or someone at that level. I guess Kenny also now, right?
Well, yeah, Grant is aged out, but Kenny came right back in and filled the void.
Right. So the juniors can kind of get discouraged if they're never ever getting anything based on who shows up to the match. So one of the suggestions someone put out was to award, give medals or some kind of recognition to all the juniors. And I don't think that's a problem. The awards are such a small factor when you look at the overall match expenses that if you decided to do that early, you could easily budget that into your match and have that available for everything. Shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that or not, and it's not my decision on how that goes. I will add that, unless you're number one, there's always somebody better. Well,
there's always someone better even at that.
Yeah.
They might not be in the sport yet.
Yeah.
Or they're coming up.
Yeah. I mean, Kenny is a perfect example because this year it was his first world speed shoot.
Yeah, but he's dry firing right now as we're recording this podcast, Jeff. You know what
I mean? California, where it's
That's right. So as you can see, Matt, we've got some real third world problems going on here in Steel Challenge.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's terrible. Well, Matt,
listen,
I want to ask one really pointed question.
Sure, go ahead.
And this is not to put you on the spot, but it's just to clear up a lot of things that I've heard a number of my friends say. And so I promised I would ask it. And I'm going to ask this in the most respectful way because this is not what our podcast is about. But there was, on one of the podcasts that you're part of, and some Facebook posts, there was the title, and I'm going to paraphrase it, Matt's going to war against the board of directors of USPSA. And it's a very bold statement. If you're fortunate enough to win, these are the guys that you're going to have to work with, because you're only a person that can bring ideas, and then you have to convince them to get their vote, because you've only got 1/9 of the vote as the president.
Correct. Yep.
How are you going to smooth that relationship over so you are able to help forward your ideas, and you're not in a position of, well, that idea is Matt's, even though it's good, we're not going to take it because it was Matt's idea?
Yeah, so I'm actually dealing with that right now.
Okay.
As Area 3 director. There was a podcast that got put out about that. I just want to clarify that the title on that podcast I had nothing to do with.
Okay.
There's been other podcasts that reference my name out there that basically say that I'm continuing the war or anything like that. And I can't control what someone puts on the name of a podcast or how they reference my name. The only thing I can talk about is what I said during that podcast. And the biggest thing I said was people from every area have contacted me on how the process works, what's involved to become an area director. And I've been 100% open with them. I think the biggest problem is I'm trying to think how to say this. There's not a lot of openness to what areas are up for election and when.
Okay.
I think that's improving. I don't think it's as good as it could be right now. So Steve or Jeff, do you guys know what area is up for election, let's say this year and next year? And Area 3 was obviously this year.
I do not.
Do you know what other area was?
You're testing my memory. Area 2 was it at the same time, or was it the year prior? I apologize.
Area 2 was previous. It was in 2020.
Oh, okay.
So this year was Area 1 and Area 3. And next year is Area 4 and Area 7. So every 2 years an area is up for election.
Right.
And I think the biggest problem right now is, well, one of the biggest ones is everybody hears USPSA area director. So it's an assumption that it's only able to be ran or filled by a USPSA competitor or a more USPSA-centric competitor. And that's not true. So USPSA is an organization that has several different disciplines or sports underneath it. USPSA, Steel Challenge, Multi-Gun. I believe there was a legacy where they had like a single gun, like PRS and stuff like that, that was wrapped under Multi-Gun. So we'll just say there's 3 main ones right now. And every area director represents all 3 of those. Is there a more weight towards USPSA-centric people on the board right now? Yes, 100%. And I think that should change. I think we should get diversity in there. I think in the ideal world, you'll have a nationally elected president that does everything and is not specific to one discipline and is 100% sure not against certain disciplines. You'll have a mix on the board of the 8 area directors that make up, what do you say, 2 1/3? That doesn't really work out math-wise, but say if you have 2.
Oh, we're happy to cut one up into parts. We could cut up. We'll find someone to volunteer and we'll cut them up into thirds.
Well, Area 6 is the biggest area. Maybe we should section that off into separate areas.
That's where I live.
Yeah, same here.
All right,
You
so
know,
we'll just
we're-
add you.
Steve
You
and I
guys
are-
will be area 6.1 and area
Yeah.
6.2.
There we go. You know, yeah. Steve and I are more than happy to come to the area director. I'm not sure how Bruce Wells feels about that, but okay. So I like where you're going here.
I think we should have a diverse field of experience on the board in every aspect. It could be your level of participation. I think it should be what disciplines or sports you're involved with, your professional experience, your background on that. That's not something we talk about a lot, but I think currently on the board there's 2 people that work for nonprofit or not-for-profit organizations, and that's not very well known, and I think that gives the board a lot of experience and be able to pull a bunch of ideas from different areas in.
mhm.
And I think that's what we have to continue to do.
Excellent. Okay. Second one, then we'll go back to some of Steve's stuff. With
Sure.
regards to the board changes that are coming up, and I just read the board meetings, and there's been quite frankly, the minutes were some of the longest I've ever read. To your point, I did find it interesting that I think 3 times it's like, let's go into executive session, and then 3 minutes later they're out of executive session, and then
Yeah,
that was weird. It was just weird.
We've got a lot of it for sure. It was weird, and I'll be honest, it was about an employee issue where we thought we had finished it, but we needed to. We continued to talk, so that's why we came out, and then we're like, someone mentioned that this is still an issue, and we had to go back into it. So
Okay.
that was strictly an employee issue that we thought we were done discussing, and then had to go right back into it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. It was,
It did look bad. It looked bad optically.
Well, it was just, I don't want to say it looked bad. It was just weird. It was just weird. It's like, what's going on here? And again, we didn't have the context. To me, it's a lot better than what I saw, I don't know, 8 months ago, where it was meeting started, vote to go in executive session, come out of executive session, vote on issue discussed during executive session, and you never got to tell what the issue was. There were the votes, meeting ended, and that was the notes.
Well,
So
there were
a lot better than that.
Yeah, I think the minutes have gotten greatly better. I think you could expand on them a little, where you add about like what X person said about this, and then the discussion, and then another person said this in discussion. And at that point, it almost makes sense to either release a transcript of the meeting or just put the meetings out there. I don't think there's anything except for member discipline, employee talks. Basically,
Right.
You can't have that in open session.
Right.
And then there's some opportunities that probably need to go into executive session. Say if USPSA as the org was going to buy a sport that's already out there, like that, some of that stuff should be talked about in executive session before it's talked about in open session. Obviously, about what pay for the sport is, or what anything that they're going to do with that.
Sure.
So there's certain things, and I think we should actually put some boundaries about it, where you only go into executive session for those things. And you can't really use it as a hiding spot. And the first meeting I was involved with, it was a 4-hour meeting, and I think the first 2 hours were basically getting me up to speed with the organization, and then immediately went into executive session. And there's been some different thoughts from the board since then, that all those discussions that maybe would have been immediately entered into executive session are now had out in the open. So they're not trying to hide it. They're trying to be more transparent. And
That's
you
it.
saw on the USPSA podcast.
Right. I mean, I've
also
always,
where they talked about it.
Yeah, I just noticed that started in it, and I haven't had a chance to listen to them yet. I see Troy's got a podcast, the DNROI podcast, which I think is great. I think anything we can do to provide information out to the membership in any facet, I think is a positive. And then how that information is taken is, of course, based on the end user. I like what I'm hearing here personally. And again, to me, it's all about actions and not just saying stuff. And I am seeing the actions. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that I'm calling, BS on this, because while we've heard there's going to be more transparency, we're actually seeing it now. We're actually seeing more in the minutes. We are seeing, although transparency, having a national meeting is not transparency, it does give the end users that chance to raise their voice. And that's a perfect opportunity to do it. Yes, not everybody can make nationals, but again,
so that's why I like the quarterly member meetings, where they're virtual meetings where people can submit questions and the board can address them. I don't think quarterly Zoom calls for 2 or 3 hours every 3 months is out of the. I don't think it should be out of the expectation of being a board member.
Personally, I love the idea as long as there's I don't want to say a need, but it's like, if not much has changed in the last 3 months, it's just having one for the sake of having one.
Well, here, let me put some kind of examples of what I would like to see, and if
that's great,
if this was able to be done. So I think we should have a quarterly financial update, because right now the only reporting on the financials is 6 months into the next year, and those reports are made for the previous year. So there's not a very timely public financial statements put out to the membership. And everything I can see, financials are good. I think we have a very professional person in Gary, DFO, doing that. I don't think it would be much extra work if he put out that statement every 3 months or every quarter. Now, obviously, there's some concern about it being audited financial statements versus estimates at this point, at that point. So members got to go in with an open mind if that stuff is out there, that there might be reclassification of certain expenses or revenue that would move numbers around. So as long as the members are open-minded about that and don't, it's going to take a little bit to put that out and get people used to it. I think there should be a presentation from an update at least from every area director. So every area director should at least say something. They can update on their match that's coming up. They can update on previous matches in their area and how successful they were, or stuff that they see that they're getting member feedback on what could improve, and request the members that are watching to offer feedback to the other area directors on that stuff. I think the other directors from basically the DIT, DME, DNROI should also have presentations on what they're doing. And those are obviously employees, so that would have to be worked out with whoever's their manager about their hours and stuff like that. But I think that if you substitute coming in at 8 and work until 5, instead you come in that day and you work from 12 to 9 or something like that, that should be able to be accommodated and figured out and done once a quarter. Shouldn't be that bad. And then you have members submit questions, and the board members can address those or answer any of those questions on those quarterly meetings. So that's what I would like to see.
Excellent. All right, Steve, I'll shut up for a little bit. It's your show now.
You promise, Jeff?
No. Okay, I have another question. I was only kidding. See, Matt, you've listened to the podcast. This is what we do,
Yeah, no, I get it. I listen to it quite a bit.
I
try to get as much information as possible.
this
because I'm not the
is
smartest person
right,
out
right.
there, and
Well, this
and
episode is definitely
obviously,
about you. I mean,
yeah.
and you know, that's why Steve hasn't brought up that he has a home range. But
Matt, did you know that by chance?
I have heard that previously, yes.
oh, too funny. Okay, well, I do have one other thing, but Steve, I'm going to give you a chance to get some words in edgewise.
Hey, Jeff, go right ahead. You have the floor, sir.
Oh, now you're going to put me back on the spot and what it was. So, Matt, I really like everything you've talked about here. What are your feelings about the changes that the board, which you're part of, is coming up with to the bylaws, and specifically around the responsibilities of the president? And, you know, we're still, for those that are in the know, or at least in the want to know, you know, I'm sitting here waiting, you know, what is the direction the organization going to take? Are we going to have, you know, I mean, it seems to be leaning towards there's going to be a president that's going to be more responsible for the sport, and there's going to be an executive director that's going to be more responsible for the organization as a whole, with more in line with financials and you know, doing deals and all that. I just like to get your opinion on all this.
Yeah, so nothing's totally in stone yet, and we haven't actually combined all the bylaws to put it out to the members for feedback before we actually vote on it. So that process real quick is we're still getting consensus and making changes to, based on what legal counsel has said, what previous experience from board members, how like the current board members have dealt with over the past, and the couple different ways they're doing it. So it looks like now they're going to have an elected president. They're going to have a hired managing director, and that'll be an employee of the organization. And it looks like the managing director will have the directors report to them. And then that managing director will report to the board as a whole. That includes the president. So the board as a whole will be still setting the direction of the organization, taking over, making sure the financial, basically the financial viability of the organization is still good and solid, and being responsible for that. The president will be, and the managing director will basically, like you said, be doing the business side of the organization, and the president will be doing the sports side of the organization, like being the face of the organization, having a future vision of what the sport should look like, getting member input and presenting that to the board, and then being also a representative to IPSC. That's something that's not talked about a lot, and it doesn't really make sense to even talk to Steel Challenge people about it, because IPSC doesn't have a Steel Challenge aspect, or they do have a multi-gun and PCC, but it's still basic.
And mini rifle.
Factor still. And mini rifle, yes, that's true. That's something interesting that I think we should look at as an opportunity in the future, mini rifle for USPSA. You'd have to do some stuff and might need a different sport based on falling poppers and that basically.
Yeah, activators. During the pandemic, I had so many people.
Opportunity. Yeah. There's definitely an opportunity there. We just got to figure out how to see it materialize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I have an idea. We've done a local match using all 13 Steel Challenge divisions, and we used non-falling Steel Challenge plates and like the BC zones and stuff like that, and had it just time plus. I think there's an opportunity there. I think we need to get past the bylaw stuff, stabilize all the other things, and get the current members and current sports stabilized before we even talk about new opportunities or anything like that. But there's definitely some opportunities for growth soon, but not right now.
Right.
Excellent. Good answer, sir. Good answer. Okay. Jeff's going to shut up now.
And I agree with the changes that are being made. I think we have to, this is the other part you said, we have to make sure the organization is able to be stable through changing time. So every 2 years, area directors could change. Every 4 years, 2 area directors and a president could change. So there's a high turnover or a high possibility of turnover. And I think if you have a hired person managing the business and the employees, that makes 100% sense. And I've agreed with everything that we've talked about in board meetings about that and offered any input I could. There is some conflict of interest stuff that could come up about presidential roles, responsibilities, compensation, and the board and me and Bruce Wells have already agreed with how that happens. Basically, if anybody has any, just to give a brief, during compensation talks, anybody that said they're running for president will be 100% excluded, which 100% agree with. Anybody that doesn't agree with that probably isn't thinking about it correctly and for the best benefit of the organization. There's some talks about roles and responsibilities of that position. And as a elected person for Area 3 members, I think we, and Bruce also agreed that, and the board agreed that we should be able to offer input, but if anybody feels uncomfortable at any time, that has to stop and we have to excuse ourselves from that situation.
Cool. And when you said the managing director is going to have all the directors reporting to them, you're talking about director of events, DNROI, director. That's who you mentioned when you say directors, not the area directors.
Correct. Yeah, the employee directors. And
gotcha.
I think the DNROI will still report to the board. That's not something that's been totally finalized yet. It's still in talks on that. But I think that, from what I've heard in talks and everything in the meetings, that position will still probably report directly to the board of directors.
Okay. Well, of course, this is all going to be detailed, hopefully, to the members.
Yes, this will all 100% be in the bylaws once they're all collaborated and all updated and sent out. I believe a motion has to be made and a second, and then that pauses it. There can be no bylaw changes until the next meeting, or there cannot be any votes until the next meeting. Okay. So at minimum, that's 10 days. Everybody on the board has agreed to do at least 30 days on that. So excellent. To get member feedback and input.
So let me ask you this, Matt. What was the one thing when you became an area director that you realized as an area director that you're like, man, I didn't know that? In terms of, what pops to my mind is the level of authority and direction that the area directors really have. It seems like after Mike's been gone, it seems like there's been a revelation, and that's just a complete outside perspective, whether that's true or not. So what would you say has been the big aha moment for you as an area director as you've been behind the curtain?
So I think that's a really good question, and it's not actually talked a lot about. And I think anybody that's coming in from the outside that's never done it doesn't really know what's going on. I've learned a ton. I think the authority of the board, so each board member they ultimately have all the authority. They can do all the changes. The president actually has less authority than the board as a whole. Mm-hmm. And with the changes that are coming up, I think they're going to have even less authority than authority is a weird word. I guess say power. Power is a good way to explain it. So every area director has more power than the president. And the board as a whole has the most power over the organization. They can do all the changes. The way the bylaws are currently written, that they have the board gives the authority to the president, which all that's going to change, so it's pretty much irrelevant at this point. The other thing was the financials, getting up to speed on all the current financials and how the deferred income and so if you buy a multi-year membership, obviously it's bought at a discount, but that income, that revenue for your $90 membership has to be put into revenue based over 3 years. So they have some deferred income that has to be put out and only is actually able to be put on the books based on it's not deferred. There's some other word it's called. I'm just at a loss right now. But it's basically you can't spend all that $90 the first year of a membership for that member. You have to only spend $30 a year.
You have to amortize it over years, right? Something
amortize,
like that.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yep.
And life members are amortized over 20 years. So there's a big chunk of money that the org has that isn't really accessible. I think is called a liability because those people have paid for up to 20 years worth of being members, and the organization's responsibility is to be there for them. So they have to allocate that money in a future year.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I guess my last question, Matt, and I know we're bumping right up against an hour here, and we do appreciate your time. Could you summarize just high level for us what the timeline looks like? Because I've heard, again, there's rumors out there because girls will talk, that there was like 16 people or something like that were interested in being president. And I've heard that there's really only 6 and all that kind of stuff. So high level, what's the timeline? Yeah. When could we see an election and that kind of thing?
So current timeline as of last Monday when we met was we're going to meet tonight. This is Tuesday the 30th.
Yep.
We're going to meet tonight and the next Tuesday, which is, I think, probably the 6th of December. And at that point, we should have all the changes done, a final draft able to be put out to the members for feedback. Once that's put out, the self-imposed 30-day timeline happens. And what it's looking like, we have an in-person meeting on January 15th and 16th in Florida. So it looks like we'll probably vote on the changes then. That'll give it a little more than 30 days, which I think is fine. I don't think these changes need to happen right at 30 days and we meet on January 5th or something like that. It doesn't make sense at that. To meet another 10 days, we can actually talk in person. And at that point, any members can actually petition to be at those meetings also if they wanted. So if a member wanted to come to that in-person meeting, they could request it from their area director. There's a spot in the bylaws where it explains how to do that. Pretty easy. You request it from HQ. As long as it doesn't add any expenses to the meeting room size, members are able to attend those annual board meetings without issue. Obviously, they'd be excused if any executive session was entered. And I actually attended an in-person meeting before I was area director or anything like that back in 2016, and it was an interesting way to see into that. That was Mike Foley's first meeting as president, and it was interesting to see what they talk about and financial stuff and like that. And obviously, I was excused during executive session. So, but it's interesting the behind the curtain, so to speak.
Sure.
Once that is voted on and passed, there will be a certain amount of time that any prospective people that haven't put in for the special election can gather signatures, request a petition, and then the election will have a start date. I think that'll be in the spring sometime, probably March or April. This is a total guess at this point. We haven't actually finalized this. And one thing they're going to do is change from putting the introduction and the Q&A session questions into the Front Sight magazine. There's going to be a special section on the USPSA website for that. So every USPSA member, no matter if they have the magazine or not, will be able to go on and read a biography or an introduction for each candidate and see their questions answered on the standard Q&A section. I don't know if the Q&A will be the same as it always has been or not. That's basically a policy by the board, so it's not actually in the bylaws on that. So, and I think Jake and the president had come up with that in the past. I don't know if it'll be the same or not, but it's basically like, it's a standard format every area director's answered for the last 3 or 4 years.
Sure.
So Matt, you're saying
and
that
then
there's wait, I want to get this clear
Okay.
because, I'm slightly intelligent. I put 2 and 2 together and you went, wait, you're coming to Florida in January. And I just pulled up the Florida State's USPSA champions. I'm like, oh, there's everybody. They are coming here. So
Yep.
that's, that the WAC is my home range. So
Okay, awesome.
you're saying the procedures for attending the board meeting are in the bylaws?
Yes, they are. I
can
will.
look there. I can look there.
Yeah, they're in the bylaws.
I think
Yep.
as much as I appreciate you saying, you can find them and send them to me, I actually think I think it's a member's responsibility to understand, where to go and how to get it. So should I have any issues, I'll ping you. But I think
for
it's
sure.
a good test. It's a good test of the bylaws too, to say, is this kind of thing easily found and how to do it? Because if it's not, then that's something that might be able to be tweaked as well. There's no.
Yeah,
the
I would
bylaws
actually.
aren't meant
I
to
think.
hide anything.
Yeah. If your feedback from that it was hard or any ways to improve that, for sure, let us know and we should be able to incorporate that into the changes.
Awesome.
Yeah. So there's a in-person board meeting in January. It's in Tampa. The second weekend of January, the 15th and 16th. So if any members of the org want to attend, look in the bylaws, follow the procedure, request to be added, and it should be able to be done.
Cool deal.
I think it'd be good if you were there, Jeff.
Matt, you really don't know what you're saying right now. I know it's early, brother, but man.
I think any member should be able to attend, and I don't think it should be an issue if they go there. So
Sure.
obviously, there has to be some professionalism. You can't go there just to disturb the meeting. Just as a caveat. I don't think you will,
of course
but
not. No.
there's some people that could.
This is my podcast. When I'm in something like that, I know when to keep my mouth shut and just listen. So
Matt, report back because he's not capable. well,
Jeff's in the back with his hand going, point of order, excuse me. At which point Dan Bernard and everyone from the WAC is going, shut up. Just shut up. Well, great. Well, Matt, is there anything else you'd like to add? We're right at about an hour. I'm sure Steve is about pulling into the parking lot of his real job. So is there anything else you'd like to add? Just kind of on the cuff.
Yeah, there's a couple things. So I know you talked about peak times and changing that. From what I've seen, the USPSA org database is very strong and robust, and I think they have all this info that anybody would be able to look at, and I think it's easily accessible. Currently, we're talking about changing the high hit factors for the USPSA classifiers, and the way Rick Brotzel, the IT person, has built the system, the database, it's almost automated, but you could easily go in there and see changes that are needed, and it gives you a heat map and a percentage and the previous like what the time was or the hit factor was and what the new one needs to be based on a certain criteria. I haven't seen any of that for Steel Challenge, but based on my experience with Rick and how good he is at his job, I think that already exists. So I think we need to leverage what we have there, get input from the people with the experience and the knowledge, And I know we've talked about in the past, Jeff, how you think it should be done, and I think we should definitely look at all those ways.
Yeah. Here's something I want to add though. And this is something that really just occurred to me about a month ago. Back when they had what they call the Optics Nationals, it was part of the 9 days. Okay.
Yep.
And 3 of the days was the Optic Nationals. So, yeah, you had Max and JJ, you had the top shooters, and there were, I think, 7 or 8 stages that were, set up as potential classifiers. And I think maybe 6 of them made it. Okay.
Correct. Yep.
And people are going, okay, the best in the world are shooting these, and we're going to use that as their criteria for the high hit factor. And you go,
Yes.
Great. I can almost guarantee that none of those guys have shot those classifiers again. They shot them once. Okay, my point is that, okay, maybe not guarantee. What's my guarantee? I'll quit the sport. And everybody's like, yeah, do it, Jeff, do it. But my point is that it's they may have shot them, but the potential for them shooting those is much lower. And
It is,
they also
for sure.
shot them, relatively cold and at a nationals where
Yes.
more than just trying to determine the high hit factor was at stake. Where with
100%.
regards to Steel Challenge, and Steve brought this up earlier, every stage is a classifier. We shoot them all the time. So
Yes.
the times are getting better. I believe, and I've got all the data from the world speed shoots. Rick's got access to a lot more data on the level 2 and local level. But I've got all the world speed shoot data, and I've started doing it. And what I've determined is the best are getting better at a much higher rate than the other people who may be getting better. Okay.
Okay.
And they're putting that time in. And I propose, I don't know what the algorithm is, but I propose the algorithm take into account outliers. So guys like Kenny Nagata that are shooting 120, 130% of some of these stages is, while he's a great shooter, and when Kenny goes to a match, he's not looking to say, I'm looking to win GM. Kenny's going, I'm looking to win the match. So it's irrelevant to him at this point whether the peak times change. But those peak time changes really affect the core of who makes up a match, which is your A through D shooters.
Yeah.
Okay. And while I 100% agree that peak times need to change, I think what needs to be considered, and you and I have talked about this, I've talked about it with Steve, we talked about it with Steve Moneypenny, is the Steel Challenge shooters' ability to electronically choose whether they would like to be reclassified after the changes are made.
For sure.
Right.
Okay. I mean, especially if we look at Rimfire Rifle Open, and I don't think there isn't anybody who could deny that the time should change when you look at it, not from a personal perspective as what's this going to do my classification. Just look at how fast this game has gotten overall. Steve mentioned his 72 that won that. I mean, in 17, I shot a 75 and came in third at US Steel, and that's not even top 25 now.
Right.
Okay. And that's okay. But, and he was talking about, we're GM heavy, and you look at divisions like, a good example would be optical sight revolver. I don't even know if there's 20 masters and grandmasters combined, let alone you look at RFRO and there's, a ton of them. But what also Steve mentioned is, for a guy like me, and for, I think, a lot of other people, if I, my peak time is, for sake of argument, a 70, and you turn around and say, okay, the peak times are going to be, it's down to 60,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to lose my GM moniker. I earned that when I could.
Right. Right.
So the whole potential of this electronic thing where, it's not manual. So, Rick or whoever might be involved in it has to go in and for each request, tweak it, and you look at what happened with the simulcasting. And I'm a software developer. I can't believe that this can't be figured out. So I don't know if you heard that.
Yeah,
ding.
I think that's.
I don't know if you heard that ding, but that ding was Steve going, wrap it up, Jeff. Shut up.
You can get wordy now.
So,
I think that's I think that's good. And obviously, if people want to keep their classification that they earned, I think they should. I mean, they do that in USPSA. There's a way to go down in USPSA right now.
mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm not educated if you could actually even do that in Steel Challenge right now, and if you can petition the way USPSA does it or not. I just don't know. I'll actually look that up so I'm more educated next time. But with the changing peak times, I think it would make sense if people want to go to the current classification they are with the current peak times, or keep
Mm-hmm.
their legacy historical classification. I don't think that should be something that we go against. I think it makes sense. The people say that people sandbag, but if I'm understanding correctly, your classification time is your fastest time.
That is correct.
You can't, and that's not a rolling average, right?
It is correct. It is your fastest time. And if you don't shoot that, well, that's what you get for the match, but it doesn't affect your classification at all.
Right. Okay. So you can't just go in and sandbag the next 3 local matches to move your classification down just to win a class.
Correct.
Because it's always going to use the highest.
Correct.
Yeah, so I don't think that would be a problem. I think it kind of makes sense if people want to either keep historical or be classed in the new peak times. I think that makes sense. Knowing Rick, I bet he's able to do this already. I don't want to speak for him, but
Sure.
He's very smart, and he knows the USPSA database very well. So I think if we requested him to look into this, I don't think it would take much time, and I think it would be able to be done.
Excellent.
And I think we should actually look at several different ways. I think we should look at the current way. I think we should look at the way Jeff has talked about it, using the unique, so 1 unique person per division. Because I think you talked about in limited division, there would be 1 person in the top 10, and it'd be the same person.
Well, yeah, in the past, what we've done, the methodology is what I call the top 10 unique shooters in a division on a stage.
Yep.
And the way I expressed it was, if we just took the top 10 scores at a world speed shoot for instance, the limited division, it would be completely defined by BJ Norris.
Yeah.
Because he I think in many of the stages, he owns 6 of the top 10. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So we went, we said, okay, only his best is going to count. Here's the thing. By definition, if you're taking the top 10 ever shot at a world speed shooting championships, in effect, you will approach the best time ever shot at a world speed shooting champ. It's going to change every year.
Yep.
Okay.
But is that the best time shot though, out of all matches, or is that
No,
just at
it's
world speed?
just the world. It's defined by what happens at the world speed shooting championships.
And that's how the peak times are set?
That is correct.
Okay.
and I think part of the reason for that is it's the guarantee that the stages are set up correctly, that you've got, you know, dedicated ROs, and you've got more eyes on everything. And that's not to say that anybody would cheat. I'm not saying that at all. It just, that's been the rules. But I think the algorithm needs to be better defined with regards to, you know, getting rid of some outliers, and just taking things into consideration with regards to, you know, these guys that are shooting 120, 130, sometimes even more faster.
Hey, Jeff.
Yeah.
Hey, I apologize. I've got to run. Matt, thank you so much for your time today. Enjoyed the conversation, and we wish you the best of luck, and we'll talk soon. Thanks, man.
All right. Thank you, Steve.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Yeah. So if it isn't apparent, I can talk forever. And Steve only had enough.
No, it's fine. Yeah, no, we're good.
Again, I'm not saying what we've done in the past was wrong. I'm just saying that, you know, there is an opportunity to look at it from more of a statistical perspective and going, you know, how do we change these times to better represent what's really happening in the entire division, as opposed to just what are the best guys doing?
So I think that's a good point. Do you think it should be expanded beyond just world speed for those,
it's
set
tough.
those peak times?
It's tough to say that. And the reason for that is, again, because it's not to say that the area matches, other level twos. I mean, you look at my match now, I'm only shooting the speed 6. But, you know, we're out there, we've got it laser leveled. We've got them, you know, measured down to, you know, the perfect position of every plate. When you come to the WAC, you're going to see how different it is compared to every other range you've probably ever shot at. Being an outdoor covered bay, it is definitely unique, in its aspects. I don't have really an issue, because you do have the best of the best showing up at the World Speed Shoot. I think it's just whether or not you take what we've done in the past, because I think if you add the aspect of the member being able to say, I want to be reclassified.
Yep.
I was almost an M, and now I'm barely an A, and you just changed the times. Now I'm not even an A, so I'm a B.
Yep.
But because I can't reclassify myself, I'm going to be shooting against other masters. Why do I even want to shoot this gun?
Yeah, I think, you know, that's
so I think if you were to turn around and say, you know what, you make a proposal, the board agrees, and they go, I don't think they'll do this, but they go, the peak time will be the best time on a stage in a division ever shot at the World Speed Shoot. And everybody who's listening to this is cringing right now. Okay, but if
that would lower all the peak times, right?
It would lower every peak time.
Yeah.
Every division, every stage, it would lower the peak time there, which would then lower the overall peak time. If you did that, but then added the caveat that says, oh, by the way, we've developed this electronic methodology for you to be able to go in to the website, hit a button and say, reclassify me.
Yep.
It would give people at least a chance. Now, again, a guy like me, I want to keep my GMs. I like being called a 7-time GM. I think our newly minted 13 division GM.
Who is that?
That is Daniel Matias.
Okay, awesome.
I don't think he worked his butt off to get those. I don't think he's going to reclassify himself. But I think there are a lot of people that would. And then you've got the option. And I think when you give people options and then they continue to complain, they're just complaining for the sake of complaining.
Yeah, you can't help. Those people are going to do that. And
yes,
you have to take some of their input, but you also have to recognize that no matter what you're going to do, you're not going to make them happy.
Yeah, exactly.
You should at least take their input and maybe even discuss it and go from there. But you're never going to make those people happy. They're always going to find something to complain about or anything like that, no matter what you do. Even if you literally address their exact issue that they brought up and said, I want rule X changed to say Y, and you do that, they're going to say, why did it take so long? So
Totally agree. All right. Well, we've lost Steve, and we've gone over an hour. Is there any final comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, I want to just say something that what I think we should propose several different avenues on setting the peak times.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one should be the way you did. You say use a unique person at world speed. I think we should look at just the lowest time and see how several of those scenarios look and put it out to the membership and see what they say. So if we put 3 different scenarios out and put it out for member feedback and input, and then decide after that based on what the members have told their area directors and what we've seen and discussions online and podcasts and forums and all that, if there's forums, or I guess it's Facebook now, right? and then decide on which way to go. So I think we should put out several different paths to choose and then get the feedback from that and then make a decision after that. Could be say we let's combine all 3 of those and see what that puts out at.
I will add this, I talk to, quote unquote, a lot of shooters. I do a lot of shooting down here in Florida, but it's nowhere near representative of what's happening at the national level. I'm not kidding myself. But for the shooters that I've talked to, it doesn't really matter what methodology you're going to take. Only the GMs aren't going to care, because most of the GMs are going to remain GMs. Everyone else is going to go, you're killing me. But if you follow that up with, again, we have also a methodology for you to be able to change your classification.
Yep.
Then I think you're going to get a more honest answer from the membership on which methodology best suits the needs of the sport.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think that's very good.
Yeah. And some of the divisions, it doesn't even matter. I mean, it really doesn't. I mean, we've done very few changes in the centerfire divisions, and part of the reason is twofold. Most of them have been around for 15 plus years.
Yep.
Okay. Those numbers have solidified, and the numbers are also diminishing as far as participation in those divisions.
Mm-hmm.
They're still solid. Okay.
Yeah.
And I was talking with somebody, and I said this. I said, if you wanted to see the open times get better, it's real simple. Require everyone who shoots a match that they must at least shoot open.
Or shoot a centerfire division.
Or shoot a centerfire gun. And, you can't do that because it's not fair to the end user. But people would eventually, you'd start seeing people get better. And you'd start seeing the times come down. But I mean, if you look at the numbers, again, why is every match, half of the matches, rimfire rifle, PCC, and rimfire pistol?
Yep.
Because they're fun, because they can be fast. 2 of them are 22, and they've all got a dot, and it's fun to hit stuff.
There's no holster. There's no holster requirement either.
And there's no holster requirement for any of those.
I think that's a big thing. Yeah.
It is. Listen, I love shooting centerfire. In fact, I've got one of my GMs is in Centerfire, and I'm working on 2 other ones right now. But it's a challenge, and you have to be ready for the challenge. And,
Yep.
Suddenly, I think BJ said it a long time ago where, for the better shooters, half your time is just in the draw.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's a lot.
Yeah, it is. It is. And, of course, watching a guy like BJ shoot, it's like, you kind of look at it and you go, can I ever do that? And you go, well, everybody forgets he's been doing this for 20 plus years, as has,
Yeah.
KC and these guys, and, hundreds of thousands. It's I say this all the time. It's a learned skill. It's a diminishable skill.
100%. 100%.
You got to keep
agree
up
with
on
that.
it. So.
Yep.
Awesome. All right, man. Well, thank you very much.
I'll make one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll make one closing statement about
absolutely.
kind of my platform or anything. So all my decisions are going to be made on what's best for the organization. My main platform, if I'm going to put it into 2 words, is going to be members first. We need to do everything that makes sure it's best for the members, not for anything else. That be anything else. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's not good for the members, we should not be doing it. And that's why I'm requesting input before decisions are made, putting stuff out to members before rule changes happen, bylaw changes happen, obviously all that stuff. So everything is going to be looked at from a members first perspective, and I'm going to use that to base all my decisions and votes on and anything like that on in the future, whether I'm a USPSA president and got elected into that, or if I continue on being Area 3 director for the future. So that's where I stand, and that's what I'm going to look for in any decision or any discussion that's being made.
Fantastic. Well, we appreciate you being on. Hope everybody gets a little bit out of this that helps them make their decision, because that's what it's about. Getting you in front of the members.
Yep.
and letting them listen, and we're happy to provide you that platform. So thanks again. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me on.
All right, everybody. Hey, don't forget, if you want to get that Steel Target Paint discount code, go to rangestore.net and enter code STPodcast10. Thanks again to Matt and Steve, and we'll talk to you on the next episode. Bye-bye.